Hi, everybody. I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
And welcome to English Digest, and today is our fun unit, and we're going to be talking about some idioms that have to do with the weather. And the weather, of course, is very important in our lives. Lots of conversations are based on the weather. Hey, is it going to rain tomorrow? I don't know. Oh, a typhoon is coming. You better watch out. Oh, isn't it hot outside? Oh, it's going to get really cold, etc., etc. Lots of people love talking about the weather. And because of that, we've got lots of idioms that are based on the weather.
We sure do. Most of these are pretty famous. I've used all of them in the past, every single one of them. Sometimes when we have units about idioms, I'm surprised at a couple of them. I've never used them myself, or I haven't heard of them. These idioms are all very common, very well known, and I think they're ones that you should definitely try to memorize and put into your vocabulary.
Yep, and we also might mention some in passing that aren't mentioned here. And so we'll find out what happens as we learn these 6 weather idioms, and learning them will be a breeze. So let's get to it, everybody. Let's read through the entire contents of today's lesson now one time. Idioms are fun in all kinds of weather. So here are a few classics to add to your vocabulary. A tempest in a teapot. A tempest, meaning storm, in a teapot refers to a small problem that's grown into a larger issue than necessary. People have been using this to mean blowing things out of proportion for centuries. A similar idiom can be attributed to the ancient Roman Cicero in 52 BC. Try using it in a more contemporary way. At first, I thought we were having a general discussion, but it ended setting off a tempest in a teapot. You really created a tempest in a teapot when you wrongly accused Walter of throwing out your cookies. Under the weather. Next time you're not feeling well, use the idiom under the weather. This common phrase is used when you're sick or depressed. This phrase comes from sailing. Seasick sailors were sent below deck to escape harsh ocean storms, where they were said to be under the weather bow. Fortunately, you don't have to be seasick to demonstrate this phrase. It seems that only when I'm under the weather are fun events happening around me. I can't make it to your art exhibition tonight. I'm feeling under the weather. To chase rainbows. Don't waste your time pursuing unrealistic goals or chasing rainbows. Legend has it that there's a pot of gold at the end of every rainbow. Regrettably, like any impossible goals you envision for yourself, you'll never find it. Instead, try setting realistic goals, like using this new phrase. Dylan is chasing rainbows buying all these lottery tickets. He'll never win. Maybe I'm chasing rainbows, but I hope to become a respected surgeon someday.
Well, we've got a clever writer. We've got sort of a fun idiom right there in our title, right? So if something is a breeze or will be a breeze, it just means it'll be very easy. Or maybe someone asks you today, oh, how did you do on the test yesterday? You could say, oh, it was a breeze. It was a breeze. It was really easy for you. So we're going to learn 6 weather idioms, and they're all going to be a breeze for you. So you want to incorporate them into your vocabulary. Mix up your idioms a little bit. Make it more fun for you. Here's a classic. Classic meaning it's been used and is popular still. It's been used for a long, long time. A classic. So here's one, a tempest in a teapot. A tempest is a storm. And if you think about a storm happening in a teapot, it seems kind of silly, kind of ridiculous. Well, a tempest in a teapot means someone's exaggerating things or blowing things out of proportion. That's another phrase we use quite a bit. So a tempest or storm in a teapot refers to a small problem that's grown into a larger issue than really was necessary if people had just acted appropriately. sometimes a problem can start out small, but if you don't confront it and deal with it immediately, it keeps growing and growing. So you don't want that to happen. Tempest is kind of an old-fashioned word, guys. You won't see it unless you read some Shakespeare, perhaps. Shakespeare liked to use the word tempest, but a tempest in a teapot. Do you use this expression yourself, Tom?
I know what it means, but I tend to use another phrase that doesn't have anything to do with the weather. It's called making a mountain out of a molehill. Okay, 小题大做, as you say in Chinese. Yeah, just making a big deal out of something that really isn't such a big problem. So yeah, you can say this, a tempest in a teapot, to make a mountain out of a molehill. But again, it means taking a small problem and making it into a bigger problem than necessary. And people, again, have been using this to mean blowing things out of proportion. That's another way to say this. Oh, Lisa, you're blowing things out of proportion. You're just making a mountain out of a molehill. It's a tempest in a teapot. And yes, proportion is a ratio. So if you blow things out of proportion, that means, well, it's not as big a problem as the situation dictates, okay? It's just a little problem. Yes, it's a problem, but it's not as big as you said it is. Proportion, again, is like a ratio.
Yeah, and proportion here also refers to what the correct relationship between things should be, the size it should be, the shape of it. You could say the amount of icing to the cake is out of proportion. There's way too much icing for the amount of cake that you have. So anytime you blow things out of proportion, you make it a bigger deal than it really should be. That happens quite a bit if people exaggerate the problem, or they just, they don't handle things, calmly. They get too angry and it becomes a bigger issue than it really should have been. So a similar idiom can be attributed to the ancient Roman Cicero in 52 BC. Cicero, of course, was a very, very ancient Roman politician. He was known as someone who gave great speeches, or as we call people who speak well, orators. Orator, O-R-A-T-O-R, orator. He was considered to be a really good writer as well. Of course, you'd have to read what he wrote in Latin to understand that. It's been translated, of course. But Roman Cicero, he was an ancient Roman. So try using this phrase in a more modern or contemporary way. That's what contemporary here means. It just means it belongs to the present time. The synonym, of course, is modern. So what's the first example, Tom?
Well, the first example is... At first, I thought we were having a general discussion, but it ended setting off a tempest in a teapot. So yes, if you had a meeting in the office and you were having a general discussion, but hey, somebody kind of started focusing on a small problem and they just wouldn't let it go, so it ended up setting off a tempest in a teapot. So yes, set off here just means it started something and then it was difficult to stop it. You can set off on a journey. Hey, we're driving down to Kaohsiung this weekend. We set off at 7 o'clock this morning so we could get there before noon.
You also set off firecrackers. So if you want to get the firecracker to spark and to make that noise, that big sound, you want to put a flame to it. So you set off firecrackers or set off fireworks. We use set off to talk about that too. It just makes something start happening to set off. Here, they set off a tempest in a teapot. They didn't mean to make it happen, but it just did. Sometimes that happens when the wrong personalities get involved in something. Sometimes little problems can become quite big or can be blown out of proportion. The next one is, you really created a tempest in a teapot when you wrongly accused Walter of throwing out your cookies. Yeah, so if you accuse someone of doing something, perhaps before you have all the facts, sometimes it can lead to a big argument. Maybe Walter is innocent, and he decides he doesn't like you anymore. So maybe losing some of your cookies was kind of a small deal, but now you've lost a friend because you accused him of throwing them out. So remember, Tempest in a Teapot is an issue that started out small but has allowed to be blown out of proportion, become bigger than it should have been.
Indeed. Okay, so there you have it, a tempest in a teapot. Now let's talk about another phrase, under the weather, or to be under the weather. Next time you're not feeling well, use the idiom under the weather. Okay, this common phrase is used when you're sick or depressed. Yes, you can be sick, you don't feel well, or you can be kind of depressed. Maybe you lost your pet cat, or you failed a test or something like that, or your parents yelled at you or something. So, yeah, you're kind of depressed. You could say that I'm under the weather. Usually, though, for me, I only use this when I'm actually not feeling well physically. I have a stomach ache, I've got a cold, I'm feeling under the weather.
Yeah, me too. I don't use this to talk about being depressed or very sad or feeling blue. If I called in called into work and said, "Oh, I'm feeling under the weather, but I was really just kind of very sad." I don't think my boss would take that as an excuse. So, yeah, if you're under the weather, you're not feeling very well. Where does this phrase actually come from? We're going to talk about that later after we listen to our Chinese teacher. So stay tuned. We'll be right back where we'll continue talking about what under the weather means and how it's used.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们常说跟人家聊天的时候尽量避开 education 教育、politics 政治。那到底要聊什么呢？其实聊天气是最保险的。不过我们今天不是要跟大家聊天气，而是要跟大家聊有关天气的几个实用的片语。好，那今天的第一个片语呢，就是 a tempest in a teapot。这上面没有天气耶，有哦。这个 tempest 其实就是所谓的暴风雨 storm 的意思，所以其实 a tempest in a teapot 指的就是小问题居然发展成为一个大问题，而且重点是它根本就不应该发展成大问题。为什么会有这样的片语呢？因为好几世纪以来，大家都用这个片语来形容小题大做。那么几十年前、几百年前，甚至有一种说法是，我们可以追溯回西元前52年，古罗马的西塞罗当时就有用这个片语了。我们在同样这一段的第3句的地方，看到最后面句尾的52，有没有看到 52 BC？ 这个 BC 指的是 before century， 也就是西元前。所以这个片语真的好久好久，当然你还是可以用一种比较现代的方式来去使用它。比如说呢，班上进行的讨论到最后吵起来了。像下面打星号的第一个例句，不过我们想要注意的是，这个重点是这个名词片语它会搭配第一个动词 set off。set off 就是点燃的意思，或者有可能像看第二个星号的例句，如果你觉得别人做错什么事情，其实根本没那件事，那小题大做嘞，那真的茶壶里的风暴。我们看到标星号2的例句，其实还有一个动词，你也可以用 create。Create a tempest in a teapot. 好，那么接着我们就来看一下第二个片语咯。第二个片语字面上叫做 under the weather， 在天气底下，这什么意思啊？其实它指的是身体不舒服，觉得心情很不好，甚至有点喝醉酒了，都可以用 under the weather。那么这个片语通常就是生病或者是沮丧的时候来使用。不过我们在这个片语的第一句可以特别把最前面2个字的 next time 把它框起来，下次如何如何，中文感觉不到它的词性，可是英文的 next time 其实是个连接词片语哦。我们中文说下次当如何如何，英文只要2个字 next time。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, let's continue to talk about the phrase under the weather. And again, we said that it's mostly used when you're feeling sick. Some people might use it when they feel depressed, but most people use it when they feel ill or sick. And the phrase comes from sailing, okay? So that's where this phrase came from. It comes from people who work on the ocean. Seasick sailors were sent below deck to escape harsh ocean storms where they were said to be under the weather bow. The bow, of course, I think is the front part of the boat, the bow, and then the back part is the stern. So yes, indeed, if you're seasick, that means 晕船, as you say in Chinese. You just don't feel well because of the boat moving around and stuff like that. You feel seasick. Lots of people get seasick when they take the boat from Taidong out to Green Island. They get seasick on the way there. And so if you're seasick, you get sent below deck. You're not on top, you're below deck because you want to escape those harsh ocean storms. If something's harsh, it's severe, it's bad, it's damaging. Food can be harsh. Ooh, that's quite harsh. It has a very strong flavor. I can't really eat that. It's too harsh.
Harsh can also mean someone who is speaking in kind of a mean way to you, not a kind way. Wow. Ooh, you're so harsh. Or maybe you're disciplining someone who has done something wrong. You can be too harsh if you're too mean or too strict with someone, too harsh. Harsh ocean storms would be very tough storms to get through. So harsh conditions are difficult to live in, very uncomfortable. Harsh ocean storms. Wow, if you're on a boat or a ship and there's a harsh storm, you probably will all get seasick. The only person I've ever met who didn't get seasick was my dad. He loves being out on the ocean. I get seasick. It does help a little bit if you can go below deck. The ship isn't moving quite as much underneath the deck. So if you get seasick, try that. Or take some seasick medicine before you get on a boat. So, yeah, that's where it comes from. These seasick sailors were sent below deck to feel a little bit better, and they were said to be under the weather bow. Fortunately, or here's the good news, you don't have to be seasick to demonstrate this phrase. So how is this phrase used in modern-day English? We're going to give you an example or two here.
Here's an example. It seems that only when I'm under the weather are fun events happening around me. So basically it seems that, if something fun is happening, I tend to get sick and I can't participate. So this person is very 可怜, very pitiful here. When you're under the weather, everybody else is having fun. And the other example sentence is, I can't make it to your art exhibition tonight. I'm feeling under the weather. I'm feeling kind of ill. I don't feel so good, so I can't go to your art exhibition.
There are a lot of these idioms and phrases that we have used over the years, and it seems like we just keep getting more and more new phrases and idioms that appear. So, yeah, these are some good ones. Here's the last one officially here for today. To chase rainbows. We love rainbows. And supposedly, according to legend, at least a legend that comes from Ireland, the country of Ireland, the Irish believe if you chase a rainbow to its end, you'll find a pot of gold. So throughout history and lots of different cultures, we found that rainbows are good things. They're positive, and they bring luck sometimes.
Indeed, so we're talking about chasing rainbows. And yeah, I guess it's kind of impossible to actually chase a rainbow because it's like a light refraction in the atmosphere. And every time you try to run toward a rainbow, it changes position or it disappears. So it looks like it might end over there behind that house, but it's not actually there. It's an illusion. But in any case, rainbows seem like they're someplace. But if you don't want to waste your time pursuing unrealistic goals or chasing rainbows. So again, chasing rainbows is, trying to get something that you're just not going to ever get. I want to be the richest person in the world. Nah, you're chasing rainbows there. It's never going to happen. And pursue means to go after something. You could pursue a career in medicine, for example. Or you could pursue that pretty girl who lives next door. Hey, you'd like to get to know her, wouldn't you? Well, that's kind of unrealistic because her father is a hotshot lawyer and she would never give you the time of day. So your pursuing her is unrealistic, which means it's just not going to happen. You're living in a fantasy world.
Yeah, it's not really reasonable. It's not sensible. It's not a practical thing to do. You have no hope that it's going to happen. Unrealistic. So we often will use this to talk about people who are really impractical or not practical at all. Well, he's really unrealistic. He thinks he's going to finish the project 3 weeks ahead of the deadline. That's just unrealistic. So, yeah, sometimes you need to set good goals that help you really try to go beyond your comfort zone and try to accomplish something that's difficult, but not impossible. So as Tom was saying, when I was a kid, I wanted to chase rainbows. I wanted to get closer to that beautiful rainbow so I could touch it. And then I realized that, yes, as you try to follow it, it sometimes disappears because it's just built on light, reflecting. So it's kind of cool. Now, legend has it that there's a pot of gold at the end of every rainbow. I talked about that earlier. Legend has a legend is a story usually that's been passed down through time. Usually it's a traditional story that people just tell again and again and again, and it just is passed down through generations. It could be true, it could even be historical, but sometimes it's not quite all based on fact, or sometimes it's not based on fact at all, and there's no way to prove whether it's true or not.
Right, but that's what they say. People say that there is a pot of gold at the end of every rainbow, Regrettably, like any impossible goals you envision for yourself, you'll never find it. So this is regrettable. That's an adjective. It's something that you should regret. And here it's an adverb, regrettably. Like any impossible goals you envision for yourself, you'll never find it. So a lot of us probably have a lot of impossible goals when we're younger, and then eventually we get more realistic about life, and then our goals are more realistic. They're not so unrealistic, and we're not chasing rainbows anymore. Now, here we've got the word envision. That just kind of means you imagine this. So you might envision yourself living in a really big house, driving an expensive car, having servants and stuff like that. I think most people envision that. That's what they fantasize about, being really, really rich. Or you might envision yourself being an astronaut or being a scuba diver, or maybe even you might envision yourself being a bus driver.
A similar word that's used more by the British folks, the people in the UK, is envisage. I didn't think that was a word we used at all until I was watching some British television shows, and they kept saying, I envisage this when I finish the skirt that I'm sewing. It was a sewing competition I was watching, and I thought, envisage? What? Yeah, so Americans will say envision. The Brits will say envisage. So you should get used to both of those, especially if you plan on going to the UK to study. So I want to say, though, it's not bad to set really high goals. I think it will make you stretch and become better than you normally would. Most of us, if we don't have goals, we just settle. We don't really push ourselves to achieve a whole lot. So try setting realistic goals, but make them difficult to achieve so that you stretch yourself. Here are two phrases using this particular idiom. Here's one. Dylan is chasing rainbows, buying all those lottery tickets. He'll never win. Yeah, some people are chasing rainbows if they're buying a lot of lottery tickets. They hope to win the big jackpot. I wish them luck, but don't waste all your money buying lottery tickets.
And the last example sentence we have for you here today says, maybe I'm chasing rainbows, but I hope to become a respected surgeon someday. Yeah, maybe you are chasing rainbows. Medical school is quite difficult, and lots of people would like to become respected surgeons. So it may be more difficult than you imagine, but hey, if that's your dream, go for it. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
那当然这个片语呢到底是怎么样来的，它其实是来自 sailing， 它是来自于航海。那么我们知道航海啊，船员在船上有时候会晕船，那么晕船的水手就会被送到甲板以下去躲避严酷的海上的暴风雨。也就是说，据说呢，晕船的选手会在甲板底下去躲船头迎风的地方。不过当然不一定要用晕船来示范这句话了。我们看一下这个片语当中第三句的最后面看到的是来源 sailing， 也就是航海这个字。而第四句呢，关键就来了，有出现了一个补充说明非限定用法的关系子句。好，先请把逗点前面的两个字抓出来，叫做 below deck， 甲板以下。逗点之后的 where 指的就是我们刚刚抓出来的两个字，这个地点。水手如果晕船了，会被送到 below deck， 甲板以下。逗点之后的 where 代表的是 and below deck， 而在甲板底下呢，他们据说就是去避那一个暴风雨，所以叫做 under the weather bow， bow 指的就是迎风处的意思。好，所以你大概会怎么用呢？当然在星号当中我们有看到的是身体不舒服就会如何，或者像第二个星号我们看到的是我今天做不到一件事情，因为我觉得身体不舒服。第二个星号前面我们可以把它画起来，蛮常搭配这个片语出现， I can make it to something because I'm feeling under the weather。好，第三个片语呢，就是有关于彩虹咯。如果你追彩虹，感觉好像很梦幻呢，可是夸父追日，彩虹能追吗？其实不太能追耶。所以其实追彩虹 to chase rainbows， 或者是 to chase a rainbow， 你用单数也可以，就是做白日梦的意思。好，那么当然这如果说是你做白日梦的话，就表示浪费时间追求一些不切实际的目标。因为根据传说啊，以前的人都会觉得说彩虹的后面就会有一罐黄金，所以如果你去追这个彩虹的话呢，你就会找到那个黄金。好，当然到底有没有黄金不知道啦，不过我们要注意一下这边片语当中第二句前面四个字给它画起来， Legend has it that 就是我们中文的传说如何，根据传说。好，不过很遗憾的是呢，当然我们也不可能为自己预设很多不可能实现的目标，因为我们也永远找不到黄金啦。所以当我们说 to chase rainbows 就变成有做白日梦的意思哦。好，以上是我们今天的内容，我们明天还会带大家看更多有关天气的片语，我们明天见。
We're out of time for today, guys, so we hope you'll join us in our next program. We're going to continue talking about idioms that are used that are based on weather, which is always a fun thing. So we hope you'll join us then. Thanks to all of you for your listening and tuning in for English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye.